what we understand by it, and more deeply and more importantly, I think what our experiences are, and trying to go be authentic and go as deep as we can in those experiences of faith, and what it means to have faith or not have faith or live in faith and all those. And I think one of the things that's one of the kind of phrases that came out to me as we were thinking about it last week, or I was thinking about it, was around living in the questions and trying to live in those questions and not answer them too quickly, but to let them have their way a bit in us, I guess, and so I think that's what we're trying to do, isn't it, James?
Yeah, absolutely. Like not provide answers so much as I suppose talk a little bit along the lines of where we've encountered questions, how we've navigated them, and I suppose express them as well, and the consequences to some extent.
Yeah. So, is anything hot for you today, James?
There are a few things that certainly last week got me thinking about. I think the thing I took away, in addition to the sort of living in the questions and being, I suppose, comfortable with the ambiguity of faith, and I suppose in a broader sense, life in general, was the acceptance side of things, and that's sort of been like a resonant word for me for a while. And I suppose it sort of got me to think a little bit along the lines of I suppose other times or other phrases that have had that impact, and although I can't, it's funny, like trying to think back, what were they, what were the things that really got me, I suppose, like feeling something different and going, that kind of captures a little bit of the element, essence of it, or a little bit of it touches on the supernatural or the spiritual, or however we frame it. One of them, the words was surrender, and that's still for me a big word whenever I think of it, and whenever I think of like what it means to me and where I have surrendered in my life, and maybe where I can still surrender. So it's sort of a word that I suppose I first kind of met its power, or the potency behind it, in the old hymn, I Surrender All. Which is familiar to you. And the lyrics are I surrender all to thee, my blessed Saviour, I surrender all. And it's just I remember singing that when early on in my journey, I suppose, like shortly after I'd come to faith, and that just the power of those words sitting in me and sitting with me, and I suppose it's interesting thinking about that, because it's hard to say what does surrender look like and what does it not look like. And I suppose it's one of those things, isn't it, where we can ask ourselves those questions, or people can ask us those questions, but we won't. Only, I suppose, inside, if you are letting go of something, if you are releasing something, or going, I'm not going to hold this anymore. I'm not going to allow this to be my burden. I'm going to let my God take this. I'm going to lay it at their feet. And it kind of speaks into that, the words that Jesus says, my burden is light, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. can never remember which way around it is, but that part.
Hopefully the burden is light. I think
Yeah,
that's it.
that's right. Yeah. And and again with that, the whole the concept that the following God doesn't have to be a chore, doesn't have to be hard or a challenge all the time. That being it with Him and in His presence, or um, just experiencing God in whatever way you experience, doesn't have to be some striving, difficult, challenging way of being, but actually our most natural, our most comfortable, our most relaxed, and I suppose surrendered way of being.
It's so interesting.
Mm.
You're kind of holding two things, I feel there,
Mm.
James, of um, the that there's a relaxed way of being, as you put
Mm.
it, and I love that, a relaxed way of being, and this word surrender, and
Mm.
like all that connotes for me of I don't know, sacrifice or
Mm.
give it where and and how those link, and I think they do link,
Mm.
but at first it's a
They
they
feel
link when they
different.
settle in you. I think,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose it's sort of like the sense of surrender where you're um, yeah, it's a letting go. It's a complete sort of like, okay, I'm not, it's like the crash of not being able to carry on, of not having any more to give. It comes from the point of like being spent, and so you haven't got any more fight left in you, so you surrender. And that surrender is that place of peace and place of calm and place of just real uh, stillness that comes after a really hard battle. Um, and I suppose the sense of surrender is you've lost. You know, that battle is over, but not in your favour. And yet, the what you've been fighting against is not something that's ever meant you ill or meant you harm, and it's not something that has ever um, been against you, but it's always been for you. And what you've been fighting against is trying not to allow that into your life. And so the surrender is, oh, I finally, you know, I'm letting the walls down. I'm opening the gates. I'm letting it in, and allowing that to be the new order, the new way of things, um, the new way my life is, uh, in a state of openness. Um, yeah. So yeah, it has some interesting connotations. I suppose it has like a lot of there potentially quite a lot of negativity surrounding it, particularly for people who in the past surrender hasn't been an option, where they've had to keep fighting and had to keep pushing for whatever they need or whatever they wherever they are in life. And I think that that's a human struggle. I don't think that that's limited to any one group of people or one area of life. I think we all go through various struggles where we feel like we're fighting and we can't stop. And if we stop fighting, then something bad will happen. And then to experience something where you surrender and it's not something bad but something infinitely good, um, is really quite shocking and relieving. There's a real relief in surrender, a real release and letting go.
Mm. It's like all these things we've held on to
Mm.
for whatever reason, and it's like that moment where we think, why was I holding on to them?
Mm.
or,
Yeah.
or oh, I don't need to hold on to them anymore. I can let
Mm.
them go, and the relief in that. Um, I'm also really conscious, and I think some of my own stuff is coming in
Mm.
of I guess there's two things going on for me. One is, and maybe we can come back to this later, but one is the how surrender is linked to faith, but also how fighting is linked to faith,
Mm.
and actually there, um, and for me, faith um, faith is about surrender, but it's also about kind of clearing away or surrendering all the rubbish stuff that I
Mm.
cling to, all the rubbish stuff that like my mind focuses on, and I do compulsively or addictively
Mm.
almost. But it refocuses that drive and that energy onto something worthwhile, maybe, or refocuses onto actually something that I feel matters, and so it leads into fighting for something else.
Yeah, like it refocuses or um, rechannels you in a new
Yeah,
direction.
and also like just widens me, I
Mm.
guess, um, in the sense that all these other things that I can be addicted to, they kind of hollow me out and they kind of pull me out of myself,
Mm.
or you become like, I don't know, bloated in some way or pulled in many ways. And this is kind of like a faith, like it's like an influx almost of like yeah, where you, and I guess it's that surrendering of all these things that are
Mm.
pulling you in different directions or you're holding, but then it's a kind of going in and finding a vast measure within yourself
Mm.
to give to something that that means more.
Yeah, yeah, like a refreshing almost.
Yeah,
Yeah, refilling.
yeah.
Mm.
And I guess for me, a lot of my a lot of my Christianity has been about surrender, um, but it's not been about fighting.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
and 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 so you end up giving yourself, like, you end up maybe at peace, but
Mm.
I think for me there was a point where I looked back and thought, well, what am I doing? Where what am I what am I here for?
Mm.
Um, and what am I contributing here? And part of my story has been re-getting in touch with that fight, or that, you could call it the warrior, or you could call it joining in God's work of love,
Mm.
and yeah. So I'm interested by that sort of, and I guess when I heard surrender to begin with, I was thinking, ooh, like, so much I've heard about surrendering is disempowering, I think,
Yeah.
um, and I think it can be abused in communities
Mm-hmm.
um, the where maybe a tacit or underlying message is that you've got to surrender your life to the church or to this
Yeah.
community, um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and um, yeah. So I'm intrigued by those tensions, I
Mm.
guess. Of
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely, and it can be in the same way that uh, humility is used as a way of keeping
mm,
people subservient or
mm,
oppressed or downtrodden or controlled in some way.
yeah,
Um, so too can surrender be used in that way. Um, I like what you're saying about the fighting and that sort of, it gets you going in a new direction. I suppose I've never really thought of it in that sense before, um, but certainly, yeah, that there is a there is a real element for me of clearing out, of I guess opening all of the windows and just letting the fresh air flow through, um, and being in a new space, a new mode, and a new mindset. Um, and I think it's funny because I suppose it's something that um, certainly um, when I a few years ago, um, I would have said, "Oh, it's essential to do every day." And now thinking about it, I'm like, "Yeah, it probably is essential to do every day." It isn't something I do every day, um, and I don't think I did it every day. Even then, even back when I was part of the church and doing, I suppose, what you might term good works and that sort of stuff, and yet it was probably just as crucial then as it is now for me to do it regularly and just be open and allow. But I think the key is not surrendered to you're not surrendering to um, an an ideology or um, an institution or a church or a body or a group of people or a person. You are surrendering to that power, what I would call God, what I would call Jesus, how I relate to this personality that is bigger, the greater being, greater than myself. And that's what the surrender is to, and it becomes an empowering thing rather than a disempowering thing, because it becomes like I suppose a way of allowing God to just clear out, and as you were saying, refocus and um, repurpose your life in the right direction. It's sort of a clearing out of all of the dross and all of the stuff we don't need, and giving us new direction and new. Not even, I suppose, even new direction isn't quite right, because it's more just like a refreshing, like a renewing, and with it comes like a sense that that there is more to life, there is more to be had and seen and experienced than I'm currently doing or I'm currently settled with. Um, Again, I'm probably going to quote him a huge amount when we have these talks. But C.S. Lewis says that the problem is not that we're satisfied with much; it's that we're satisfied with too little. We're like children who are playing with mud pies when we're being offered a day at the beach. And I have no idea which one of his books that comes from, but I just know that it might be near Christianity, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, this sort of sense that there is so much more to be experienced and joy to be had, and we settle for like the mundane. We settle for these things that aren't actually really like the main thing. We're sort of seem content with like the stuff that isn't that great. And even just saying that now, I'm like thinking, oh yeah, that's so true of my life. There's so many things I could be doing and could be like investing myself in, and people I can be investing in and spending time with, even electronically or like just by sending a message and just exploring, seeing how things are going for them. And yet I don't. And yet there's something that holds me back. And is it um, my own ability to cling to ideas and theories that I've got from my old life or from where I was before, or is it just like a laziness, or are there other factors? And frankly, I don't know. But I'm sure if I when I do like just surrender and come back to a place of stillness. And I think that that's the key for me. Is there's an element of stillness that um, that's associated with surrender, um, and that's where I become revitalized, reinvigorated for things.
Mm. When you were talking about the windows being open and just that refreshing, like I felt it in my body, like that just whole, like a big breath, I guess,
Yeah,
but that breath where you aren't all in your head still,
yeah,
and just yeah, I really felt that, and it made me think like um yeah, I think one thing I was thinking was we're not saying that this is always possible, or that
no,
at least I'm not saying I've ever accomplished that always, but that um and that we are in that, we are like I certainly find myself not in this place of surrender, not
yeah,
in this place of being breathed through. um what it struck me as almost that in surrendering I could feel again.
mm,
um and and it again, it jarred with me slightly of when you said it's surrendering to a higher power or God or Jesus, or
mm,
um and I feel like yes, and again that can be misconstrued
mm,
by our own thoughts or what we've been told about this
yeah,
God, Jesus, and maybe something many can relate to is surrendering, um so we're more in touch maybe with the world around us,
mm,
um and surrendering we're more, I guess, I don't know, Rogers, I remember in describing the I forget what it's called, but um where we're heading to, or where we
yeah.
the fully
Self
functioning person, I think he called it, or something.
actualization. Yeah,
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 maybe. I think fully functioning person was, I think, the word that I'm linking it to, but
yeah.
not that we ever get to that state, and that's always process, but
I'm so
that
glad.
he was talking about a real openness to experience,
Mm,
that and almost that we get closed off, um, and yeah, and I'm thinking, yeah, when it's often when I have when it's moments of surrender, and I
mm,
think, oh, I've been focused on all this, and actually it doesn't all matter, and there is something in there of I can trust it to God,
mm,
yeah, or I'm being called to trust that to God, and then it's like my whole body opens out again, and I'm suddenly aware, oh wow, like if it's nature, I'm in nature, and I can
mm,
feel that, or I can feel those deeper things in my body of how I'm a bit upset about what's happened with my son, or what's happened
mm,
with a friend or a partner,
mm.
or that I'm really thankful for what's happened. It's like I open out to all
Yeah.
those experience.
What's going on in the present? Almost, it's like there's almost like a mindful element to it. Yeah,
Uh,
sense of being present.
yeah, yeah. And I was interested in that idea of I can't remember exactly what you said, but um, it was like all these. I got this image, and it's one I've had before of,
Mm,
or had somebody told me rather than just saying I had it. Of like all this thing, all this experience, and all these opportunities kind of passing you by
mm,
that we get closed off from.
yeah.
And it's like in surrendering and in letting go of all that thing we're clinging on to, we're then opened out to see all the opportunities or all the connections, maybe I'd add in there, that we
Mm,
are, that we that we have here.
Yeah.
um, and that opens up possibilities, and it opens us up to just a life that feels a bit fuller, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That it gives you like, I think that that's it, isn't it? It's like a sense of not, you're not focused on the minutia and the trivia. You've got like the ability to experience it all, to experience the deeper stuff. When you were saying what you were saying, particularly about like that opening up, it reminds me of a friend of mine used to preach, and he would do this great sort of like kind of play of that, where he'd get somebody to come up and he would give them loads of stuff to hold, and they've got to try and hold all the stuff, and he would then say, "Oh, and you've got to hold this," and he'd just then start just chucking things like, I don't know, plastic balls and like cups and all this sort of stuff in their general direction, and saying, you've got to look after all this stuff. It's really important, and that's basically where we end up, isn't it? We end up with everything is so important and so vital that we hold on to this, that we're then so full we can't hold anything else. And when something really important, his last one would always be, he'd get his guitar and he'd be about to throw that. Please don't. And then he would start by giving you the guitar and say, "Now hold that, look after that." And then when he's throwing all the other stuff at you, you're already full. You're already looking after something so important that you don't need to worry about all of this other stuff that's coming in. And I've never quite mastered what he was getting at there, like the idea that you can be in that place of, oh, I've got this, so I don't need to worry about all of those other things. But there are times when I do realize, oh, hang on, I don't need to worry. I don't need to fret about this or that or the other, particularly the things that really prey on my mind, things like the environment, and things like poverty, and things like the inequalities and problems with justice that we see in the world, and just knowing that actually there is something bigger than that. That it's not that I don't fight for those things. It's not that I don't still engage in that conversation and engage in trying to put things right and make it a better place and a better world. But when it becomes overwhelming, that's when I can remember, and when that sort of sense of, hang on, I don't need to hold on to that so tightly. I can surrender it. I can give that back. And yeah, as you said, that breathing in, that being able to just take a breath, and it makes me think that when you were saying it as well, is that the Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, and I'm probably mispronouncing that one horrendously, but it means breath. So Holy Spirit is ruach, breath of God. And I really love that. when I found that out, I was like, oh, that's game changing. That's amazing.
Yeah. And there's something in that of the intimate connection with God that is like we're breathing in that life, and we breathe it out, and that's like how we receive and how we give, and it's such a powerful idea, and it makes it takes us into our bodies again, I think.
Into our present, into the reality.
And I was thinking all of that stuff that is chucked at us, of and I think I remember in our training there's a lot about shoulds, oughts, and musts. And we're chucked at so like from I mean we can there's stuff chucked at us from church or from religious communities of who we should be like and what we must do, but there's stuff chucked at us from our families and from the media, and I'm just and I'm becoming more and more struck with how much we're chucked as men, and what we
Mm,
should be like or what we mustn't be like as men. And I'm sure the same happens with women, and I know that happens, and with anyone, everyone. With it, and it's like all these things have been chucked at us that we've got to, and we've been told, you've got to grab it, got to grab it, got to hold it,
mm.
and how much we then just let go of.
You don't know where you begin and where somebody else ends, and like
Yeah,
yeah, you become so
yeah,
disparate, I suppose, as an identity. Yeah.
yeah, because it's all about what's out there,
Hmm.
and this idea of the breath of God just takes me. Oh, I'm here.
Mm.
Those things can fly past me or
Yeah,
drop at
don't
my feet.
worry about them. Yeah,
Yeah,
who you are is right. Yeah, it's you're already there. You've already got it.
and
Um,
then I think I'd link that to my power.
ah,
It's
okay.
in that in breath of God that I feel my power here. You can't really say it, but
Mm.
it
Yeah, sort of
goes in
like that,
there.
like high in your chest, just above your
Yeah,
stomach, but about
yeah,
sort of diaphragm level. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I get that.
And then that's what I'm called to fight for.
Mm.
I think that's the calling of this is what you stand for. No,
Mm.
this is what you are to stand for. What is for you to do now. Um, but we've got to let go of all that. We've got
Yeah,
to,
to
it's
allow it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and to receive. Like surrendering it's not about getting, is it?
no.
It's not about clinging. It's about being open, I
Hmm.
guess, open to receiving,
Yeah,
um, and that goes against all our fears of and our
yeah,
desire or our need to control, or to achieve, or to avoid. It goes
yeah.
against all of that of just standing here and ready and
Being.
breathing in. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really yeah fascinating because like when you were saying about power and like surrender doesn't feel like a strong word at all. It feels like oh that's the height of weakness surely height
Mm,
of weakness.
mm,
But like yeah it's what when you're saying about power I'd never thought about that before, but that is true. Like that's where our power is in who we are and in where we are, and
mm,
like and us just being us. That's where our power is. It's not about how much we achieve or do or earn or like um, you know relationships we've made or sort of like things we've done in our lives. It's about who we are in and of ourselves, and we don't need to go out there searching for it. It comes to us.
such a powerful thought, James.
Yeah,
That our power doesn't. We don't need to go searching for it.
yeah. We
That
don't
it's
need to go
already
searching
here.
for it.
Yeah.
That's great, isn't it? Oh, what a relief! What a
It
relief!
is. It is.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking. I've been reading. Oh, what's her name? I always forget names. Um, especially of when I'm about to,
yeah. You
talk
need
about
to
somebody.
quote them.
She wrote The Mansions.
Okay,
So a Christian mystic who wrote these 7 mansions,
the Seven Mansions.
and
I'll see if I can
oh,
think of it.
it's completely gone from my head. Um, but anyway, while you search for it, anyway, she was talking about um,
Teresa of Avalia.
that's it,
Yeah,
Teresa of Avila. Yeah,
Avila. Yeah,
I believe so. So I've heard others say
yeah.
it. um,
We'll go with
so
it.
and she's got a fascinating life. She was asked to write this to basically, I think it was this one, to basically prove herself to the religious authorities that she
Mm,
wasn't a heretic or something. Um, and she has all these ways of talking because she's a woman. She's
mm,
all these ways of talking of like, oh, but we women. Maybe it's just because I'm woman. I'm a woman that I'm saying this, and and you've got to give us women a little bit of leeway. And it's just so clever that she's like saying really powerful stuff, and then just able to creep
Yeah,
around the authorities by saying, "Don't worry, it might just be us being women, and let me
yeah.
have a bit of."
You've got a get out clause all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
and
because
it's
I
very
want
clever. It's very clever,
to.
and a very clever, very great way that she's being such a powerful lady
Yeah,
back in that time.
subversive.
Subverse, yeah, really, yeah. And she did lots, but her there were two things that are striking that I'm being reminded of. Is one, her core core starting point in that is that the heart of the soul
Mm,
is the place where God dwells, and He's
mm,
already there. Um, and he's got this. So she's got this idea of a mansion with 7 rooms, and you kind of go closer and closer to that heart where God dwells, and yeah. But it's that idea of the soul being a mansion, and that
mm,
God dwells in there already, and that resonated a lot with that sort of idea of we don't have to go outside of ourselves or prove something or do
mm.
something to get our power or to get our worth as well in there and
Yeah,
our
yeah,
belonging. Um, but it's already in there. Um, and and that's so contrary, like that's so counter to everything we're told, I
yeah.
think, since very early on, certainly in schooling, um,
Mm,
of not maybe explicit messages, but the implicit messages of what you should be doing and things. The other thing she keeps going on about is um, basically it's like how God desires to break us, or how God desires to just strip us of every of what I would call our ego, or or,
mm,
or, or all those things that we cling to, I guess. Um, and and she goes, like, she talks really long about, and it repeated again and again, that God, that and I think because it's a book on kind of her spiritual experiences
mm,
and mysticism, she then goes through all these ways on this path to the inner mansion, um, that we're kind of slayed, or we're kind of um, or God doesn't do something that we want Him to do, or God doesn't give the mystical experience because otherwise it will, boost our ego or something. Um,
okay, yeah.
and it's like it's kind of, for me, what I'm taking from this conversation and that in my head, it's kind of the idea here is not that we get what we want,
Mm,
but the idea is that we surrender all that, and we realize that it's already there
yeah,
within us. um
yeah,
yeah, which I think is powerful.
yeah.
I
That's hugely
and,
powerful. Mm,
and so such a contradiction to what many of us have learned,
mm.
and how we live, I think.
And I think it kind of like, I suppose, whether you're part of a church or institution or not, there's the idea that we have to strive and pursue God, and
Mm,
have to like
mm,
do all of these good works to experience Him, or like, please Him, or whatever. This whole weird concept that He's like this big deity sat on a throne
mm,
waiting for us to come to Him and please Him and all that,
mm,
or do these things as offerings and stuff, and that's that whole
mm,
sacrificial lifestyle, as opposed to, and it's subtle, the difference, the surrender lifestyle, where God is already there, He's come to us, was already there in us, and all we're doing by surrendering is opening the door and letting Him flow in and out, and be, I don't know, more more powerful in us, more potent in us, more visible in us. I don't know. The words kind of fall down a little bit. But yeah, all of the sort of there's like this external or outside life of trying to do and trying to achieve and be something that we aren't, and and that's like, I guess, what Teresa is talking about like God trying to strip away, trying to get rid of, trying to help us shed. Oh, that's funny. It just reminded me of a book by Max Lucado. It's a children's book called oh, it's gone out of my head.
We're good with this, aren't we,
We'll
James?
do really well. Oh, it's about this little puppet, and he's like a little handmade wooden toy, and he lives in a town of handmade wooden toys, and all of these toys. What's it called?
Is it called You Are Special?
You Are Special. That's the one. Yeah, You Are Special. And yeah, and about how they all put marks on each other, either a gold star or a black spot, depending on whether they like the other toys or not. And sometimes if they see a toy with lots of black spots, they'll just put a black spot on, because obviously they're not a very likable one. Then they don't even know them. And then he one day comes across one that has no marks, gold stars or black spots at all. And he asks her, why is that? Why are you like that? And she says, well, I just have a chat to the maker every day. And it's just every time I read it, it makes me cry. And it's so good. It's such a good portrayal of how simple faith can be, and yet how infinitely difficult it is to grasp, because it's a kid's book, right? It's for children, and yet there's a massive truth, a glaring truth in there for all of us. But yeah, highly recommend. If you haven't got it for your boys already, definitely recommend that. Yeah. or just yourself,
I think often the simplest idea speaks deepest, doesn't it?
Yeah. And there's something about that, isn't there? That it's not a case of trying to think our way around it or trying to reason our way through it. It is a really, really simple concept that there's something there that loves us more than we can possibly ever know and wants a relationship. And all of the other questions that we've got, like why suffering, why the devil, why evil, what about cancer, what about like mass murderers, what about like all of the horrendous stuff in the world. I'm not minimizing them, but they become secondary when we realize that the most important thing is that connection, that relationship, that meeting. And it's funny, I never think to ask about those things.
How do you mean?
I suppose when I pray, when I'm in a place where I feel really close to God, or where I'm feel that sense of power and that sense of peace and surrender and acceptance and all of those words that don't quite come close but sort of come close to explaining it, that still place. And I have questions about before that, like all of these questions of all of this stuff that's flying past us, wildfires, pandemics, homelessness, inequality, all of this stuff that is really damaging and really bad. the world over, it just doesn't. I just don't think to ask about it, or I think I have asked about it, and the only sense I get is a don't worry, you know. And because of where that's coming from, it's not a platitude. It's more than that. It's more real than that, and it's more reassuring and calming than I can possibly describe. And it's exactly what I need to hear. Yeah, so I guess that's where my sense of, you know, I don't need to worry because things are in hand. Things are like they might not look like they are, but I believe they are.
It's like maybe what we need isn't to understand, and isn't for it. And maybe what we need isn't to know, oh, you've got to do this and this and this for all these big issues that are beyond you. Maybe what we need is to know there's something or someone we can trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's where surrender takes me, is to trust. And I think back to my philosophy, when I started philosophy, that I wanted to be able to prove God. And I wanted to be able to prove him so everybody else would believe in him if they if I don't know, if they were rational enough or just approached it the right way. And really I wanted to be able to prove it to myself that that somehow unless I could prove it, that it was faulty. And we get that message a lot, and it's a part of perhaps the development of faith and seeing the rationality of it. But what it drove me to was that, oh, I can't prove this, and now what do I do? And in the end, it drove me to trust, and it drove me to, I guess, surrendering this need and trusting that that it's okay even if I can't. And I think that's where the problem of evil, and when it's kind of met in the Bible, it's not met with answers. It's met with the need to trust, which, you know, in the moment and in the suffering is very easy to say from this point. And I don't mean that in a way that's, oh, you just need to trust. Like that's just horrid. But we get het up with trying to prove ourselves, I think. And we get het up with trying to control things so that our faith remains intact. And it's like a fragile faith that we need to control all these things and I think really what, you know, if faith is anything, it's in something we can't control, and it's in something that's beyond our understanding, and somehow it's rooted and stronger than anything that's happening in our heads or our lives.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's a really valid point. It is. It's not fragile because it's not made by us and it's not controlled by us. And I think that's why it's powerful.
It's like that. It's like that. Was it a doll or a toy that keeps going back, and it's
the Russian dolls.
The toy going back to the maker.
Oh yes, yeah.
you matter.
Punchinello, he's called. Yeah,
Punchinello.
Punchinello. Yeah,
Punchinello. That's a great name.
It's good.
And how we, I guess, how we get stickered on all these things of, oh, you've got to prove yourself, and we're stickered on that. I don't know. Yeah, for me, stick it on that. Oh, I've got to be able to prove myself. I've got to be rational. I've got to, and I've got to be able to prove myself to non-Christians and evangelize somehow, and and then it's kind of like going and having those removed, and that's the moment of surrender, isn't it? It's having those things peeled off you, and it's almost like, am I surrendering it, or is somebody else doing it for me?
Yeah.
And maybe there's a bit of both in that, of how that happens.
I'm hesitant to spoil the story for you, but when he does get to the maker, spoiler alert, he does get there. House on the hill, it's very close. And he talks to the maker, and the maker knows his name, and he's really surprised that he knows his name, and tells him he's special. And Punchinello's not sure, but and he's unsure whether to believe it or not. But as he leaves, he's like, maybe could he? And the maker says, you can come and talk to me anytime you like. And as he's walking away, one of the stickers that's on him does fall off, and it's at that kind of, the maker hasn't really made that happen, and Punchinello hasn't really made that happen, but it's happened. That there's like something to do with us connecting that helps us to, I don't know, see more clearly, just be clearer in ourselves and more hopeful. Certainly less judgmental in myself, I notice. Maybe that's one for next week. But yeah, certainly I feel more in tune and present.
Yeah, and I think there's a big thing in Christianity about surrendering yourself, and I see that, but also my experience that in surrender, and maybe it's this idea that through death you get new life, that in surrender I regain myself. That in this moment of touching my faith, I feel in myself more. Not closed off though, kind of. I fill my body again.
Yeah. You embody yourself.
Maybe. And I think there's a big thing about our spirituality being embodied. And our faith takes us to makes us embodied, or embodies us again, like you said. Maybe it incarnates us. I'm not quite sure.
Hard to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is it. It becomes so difficult to grasp, to grab with words. They just they sort of fall down a little bit.
Yeah.
It's nice to try, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there is relief in trying and getting somewhere close, isn't there?
Yeah, that's it. And what I mean, I suppose, by saying, all of those words, and none of them quite hit, none of them quite grasp exactly what I mean. But when I say surrender, when I say acceptance, when I say stillness and peace, and none of them quite capture what I mean, that sense of incarnation, of bodiness, of presence, of they don't quite catch the the full depth of it.
We're about there, James, I think.
Mm. I think that's a really good place to have reached.
Yeah. Thank you very much again.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's quite right. Thank you.
and hopefully some listeners have found it useful. To Like you said last week, James, it would be great to have listeners asking questions or giving comments
Hmm.
um, or sharing a bit about their faith, and that can be part of the conversation if you want that.
Mm.
That would be really, really great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd
Great.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, let's leave it there, James, and thanks
Okay.
again.
No problem.